Today's summit is meant to serve as a forum to exchange ideas about how we can best ensure success for 189,000 students in the state of Hawaii. Our next speaker is Ken Kay, the Chief Executive Officer of EdLeader 21. EdLeader 21 is an online community of 179 headmasters and district superintendents from across the country who work together to create 21st century schools and districts. The title of this speech is Preparing Hawaii Students for Their 21st Century Lives. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm Hawaii welcome to Mr. Ken Kay.
Thank you. Good morning. Aloha. What a pleasure to be here. I got to say, my wife and I have not been here since 1992, which was at a time when nobody actually saw the 21st century coming. And so now I've spent the last 15 years of my life focused specifically on how do you make the shift from 20th century education to 21st century education? What does that represent? And I think that's actually the question the governor just asked us. So what I would like to do with you is really explore that question for the next hour and do it in a pretty interactive way, which is why I came down here. And some of you may know Alan November, who's a big tech guru in the education space. He made the observation that I really like. He says, you know, the difference between 20th century education and 21st century education is who's doing the work. He said in the 20th century classroom, the teacher's doing all the work. And in a 21st century classroom, the student's doing all the work. So I am going to create a 21st century classroom, and you are going to do a ton of work. So here we go. I think that you've had a wonderful setup this morning for the juncture at which Hawaii finds itself. And it's really an incredible moment, I think, because all of us are looking back on the last 15 years of education policy and realizing that we have actually a potential for some fresh air and potential for real dramatic change. So what I want you to start with is I want you to reflect personally first, just personally reflect on the relationship of these two words. Quietly. What do you think is the relationship between transformation and accountability? Okay. So it's hard in a room of 1,000 to get a lot of feedback on this, but is there anybody that looked at these two terms as opposite?
Related.
Yep, I got a couple. Okay, a few. I get that. So I showed this to my wife, and I don't usually quote her in my speeches, but I am so struck. I was so struck. I talk about my kids more. I was so struck by her response. She said, well, I look at the term accountability, and the first thing I think of is numbers. But then, the next thing that came to me was accountability to our children. And I thought, what a beautiful thought that is. I mentioned that because mine wasn't nearly as elegant as hers. So my thought was about whether one causes the other, whether one can lead to the other, or not. And my perception now, working with districts and schools for 15 years, is that it's very difficult for accountability to lead to transformation. Doesn't happen. But And the reason I think that we're at such a unique a moment is that if you take up the governor's call to transform, you could have transformation lead to a form of accountability that supported it. That's why I'm here. So we're going to hear a lot, and I love the remarks of Senator Alexander. We're going to hear a lot about the accountability piece. But the reason I'm here is that I really believe if the 1,000 of you own the transformation piece, the rest of the system will have a guiding star on where to take accountability. Let me say that again. If you own the transformation piece, this 1,000 can grow to 10,000, right? We don't have to cut this off at 1,000. If you guys own where you want to take the transformation, you can create the advice and direction that your leaders need to create the kind of accountability system that will support the transformation. So, the governor covered this, but I'm just going to show you a few slides that reinforce his points, because I think it's really important to say we're either at a moment where we need transformation or we don't. And I'm deeply committed to the notion that we're at that moment. So I'm one of those. I went to elementary school in the 50s, and I'm one of those that really feels deeply that the system worked. The system of education in the 50s and 60s did what it was supposed to do. I mean, we beat up the system like it wasn't designed for anything that was relevant to it. It was. We had people who were going to work in factories. They were going to be doing the same rote thing over and over again. They were asked to be deeply loyal, and they were asked to have a deep work ethic and pretty much work in a hierarchical framework. That's what our schools were. We shouldn't feel bad about that. And there's produced lots and lots of us in the room who did well under that frame, and who actually were able even to become flexible when later when we needed to. But the system wasn't designed for that. The system wasn't designed for this. This is the Google headquarters. They're not looking for people who do what they're told over and over again. They're not looking for people who work 9 to 5 in a very hierarchical structure. They're looking for self-directed people. When we wrote our book, The Leader's Guide to 21st Century Education, one of the best interviews in it is with a senior executive from Apple who said, we're at the point in Apple that if somebody needs to be managed, they're no longer employable. If somebody needs to be managed, they're no longer employable. This system is not that system. This system is. And so the question is, are we as K-12 educators really designing kids who are ready for the challenge of being self-managed? And when I go around the country and meet with folks, teachers come up to me and say, no. The kids basically walk up to me and say, tell me what to do next. How do I get an A? That's not being self-managed. That's a huge challenge for this transformation. So, why we're here is to create a framework, a direction that explains to all of you, explains to the community why the educational system needs a transformation from being ready for 1950 life to be ready for 2035 life. That's the challenge we're under. So this is the system that we know. How many of you would say that you went to K through 12 under this system? Okay, Those of you who didn't raise your hand, where did you go to school? This is audience participation. You got it. Let's try this again. How many of you went to school in a K through 12 system that looked like that? Okay, that's better. Thank you. Okay. Now, I want you to look at this slide really carefully. I go around the country, and normally this slide reads a little different. I want to explain to you why I changed it for today. Normally, I have this slide say, because I don't know how many of you know the 4 C's? Critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. That's what I'm well known for. But when the governor and Daryl and Karen Anke asked me to come, they said to me, you know, you ought to look at the department's general learning outcomes. How many of you know the GLOs? You do. Wonderful. How many of you would say you're currently implementing the GLOs? That you're currently implementing the GLOs? Okay. So, if you really follow this carefully, I took a little liberty, which is I slipped in a 7th myself, which is I couldn't let this list go without putting in creator and innovator, right? We're good with that? We're good with that. So, you know, maybe the department will think about that, or maybe when you localize it, you'll slip it in, but I think it's important. We can talk about it. Okay. So here's the kicker. Now, the first 3 questions are softballs, and then the 4th question is really hard. You're an employer, and you're going to hire someone. Are you going to hire student A or student B? Student B. Close call? Not even close. Thank you. By the way, I had a businessman in Phoenix say to me, I want student A. I said, what's that about? He goes, oh, I have something I want them to do, and I don't want them to ask me any questions. Okay. Okay. 2016 is a big election year. It's on our mind. You're the League of Women Voters, or you're Sandra O'Connor's civic engagement program. Who's going to make a better 2016 or 2020 citizen, A or B? Close call? Okay, thank you. Which one of these 2 students is going to do better in their personal challenges? Financial literacy, health challenges, family problems, A or B? Okay, you guys are good. You told me it was a good group. It would be a good group. All right, here's the hard question. I really want you to answer this. Why is it everywhere I go, everybody wants student B, and we're still stuck in the student A model? Okay, now I know you agree with that. I want to know why. Why?
Because of the bureaucracy.
Well, what was this? We were told to do. We were told. Sorry. Testing. Okay, testing. That's good. So testing emphasizes the student A model. What else? Budget. Man, I won't let you get away with that too much, because our districts are doing the student B model. It doesn't cost more. There's some transition issues on PD, but it doesn't cost more. But go ahead. What else? Why are we stuck with student A? Pardon me? Oh, did they say we did testing already? Don't throw salt in the wound. It's okay. Okay. Yes, please.
Because we were educated as student A.
Exactly. Did you hear that? We were all educated as student A. All of us, right? The teachers were educated as student A. The Board of Education, the ESSA work team, all of us as teachers, the governor, yes. Yeah, but as I said, some of us have the ability to grow out of this. But here's the deal. It's even worse than you said, sir. Parents all grew up under the student A model, right? The colleges of education are still teaching our teachers under the student A model. It goes on and on. We got a lot of work to do. But I want you to look at this, because this is the transformation that you have the capacity to own. This is the transformation you have the capacity. Oh, this is exciting prospect. Hawaii is ahead of the game because I don't know of any states that have a set of GLOs that are this good. Now, I don't want to let you off the hook. Not so fast. That's a great start. But when I asked you a few minutes ago how many of you are implementing it, I think it was about 24. So here's the challenge we're going to undertake. You got the right direction. The question is this the moment where you can really be purposeful and intentional about this and actually make it happen for every kid? Can you be purposeful and intentional about this and make it happen for every kid? That's the challenge, I think. So I want just to support this point a little more so you realize why your GLOs are good. I don't want you to take it from me. This is a January report from the World Economic Forum. And they are the group that runs Davos every year, and they interviewed the 300 HR directors of the 300 largest global companies. And they asked them last year, what are the 5 most important skills in your company? And look what they came up with in 2015. Complex problem solving, coordinating with others, people management, critical thinking, and negotiation. Does that look like student A or student B? You guys are getting quiet. Student A or student B? Okay. Now, then they were asked one more question. Where is this going to sit in 2020? And look at this. By the way, that's why I slipped in creativity and innovation. Look. Number 3 in 2020, creativity. Okay? And then, just to support this just a little bit more, Google, who you all know does everything via algorithms and analysis, they recently did a piece of work their HR directors talked about, was what is the relationship between a high school degree or a college degree and success at Google? None. So what that means is that the question we've raised about, let me go back, about this transformation is very, very relevant. Which is, can we create a set of outcomes for students that really matter to students in their future lives? So, I want to shift now because my role here is to talk to you about what are districts and schools doing that are really transforming. What does the transformation look like? And I got a call from an assistant superintendent that's in our network of 21st century districts. And she said to me, Ken, we've got a high school doing some very unique things that I'd like to take you to see. And she told me, I said to her, well, you know, my grandson lives 2 hours from that high school. And I'm going to be there in 60 days. These are the 2 days. Pick one and I'll come over for the tour. So she told me to meet her at this classroom at the high school, and I show up and there's bedlam in the classroom, flowing outside the classroom. And I just couldn't get a handle on it. It was just, looked to me, chaotic. And so I grabbed the first student I could. I said, what is going on here? He says, do you know how this class is designed? I said, I have no idea. He said, this is the Digital Academy Entrepreneurship class for 12th grade. And he said, here's how we're set up. And I want you to think about this. Imagine every senior in Hawaii going through a class like this. We were asked to create individually, all 30 of us, a business plan for a company company that would improve something in the high school. We had 30 business plans, and they broke us up into 15 teams. We then had 15 business plans. Those teams were to choose the better of the 2 business plans. We then had 15 business plans. We broke into 5 teams. The process goes on. And the winning plan that the class voted for is Emily over there. She's the CEO of the company. Her plan won. So I said, well, what's her plan for? And she said, oh, no, you should talk to her. So I walk over to the CEO and I say, Emily, congratulations. I don't understand. What's your plan? She goes, oh, well, did they tell you the story of how this started? And I said, no. She said, well, look, about 3 months ago, we walked into the school dance and 2 kids had put vodka in their water bottle. A week later, 2 kids showed up in school with vodka in their water bottles. And the school board abolished water bottles in the high school. I thought this might be a telltale story for policymakers here. And she said, we're all athletes, we're all doing something, we can't not have water all day. So I went on the internet, she says, and I found an alcohol detector. And it's a little detector, and it's got a green light or a red light. And I realized that if I took the top of the water bottle and redesigned it using a 3D printer, I could embed the connector, the test, and at the top of the bottle now, if there's no alcohol in it, there's a green light, and if there's alcohol in it, there's a red light. Yeah, please, a little applause. So this gets better. This gets better. So she goes to the school board and she says, how many of these do you want? And they go, 400. So she started, and so I said, well, that still doesn't explain the chaos in here. She says, here's what's happened. When we all agreed on my business plan and I became the CEO, I split the 30 kids into divisions of the company. And over there, we've actually never put signs up, but we heard you were coming. So we've put signs on the desk. That's the R&D division, that's the sales division, and that's what was going on in the class. They were set up as a company. So about 2 months go by, and my original assistant superintendent calls me, and she says, I've got good news. And I said, well, how did the team do? And she said, they came in second in the state. And I thought, I'd love to see what number 1 was. But anyway, and she said, but that's not the good news. I said, what's the good news? She said, I got a call last night from the school board in your grandson's district, and I'm going to be our superintendent. So I now, after doing this for 15 years, I have a superintendent committed to 21st century education in my grandson's district. Isn't that unbelievable? So, it was a great moment. I got a little tearful. So I called her back a month later, and I said to her, I know this may be a strange request, but would you mind if over the next year I wrote a blog every couple months called Advice to Ollie's Superintendent? And she said, I'd love that. So the AASA, the Superintendent's Association, has actually run the series of my pieces of 5 advice, and also yesterday or the day before published her response to my first year of advice. Is now up on their site. And if you follow me on Twitter, at KenK21, you'll see the link to the blogs. So I thought that the way to frame this conversation with you, which might be helpful, is to just share with you the pieces of advice I've given her over her first year as a superintendent. So that's what I'm going to do. So the 5, and by the way, that's Ollie in our house in Tucson. Yeah. He's cute. So I want you to pay attention to these 5 areas. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on each, but I'm going to ask you at the end, which of these is your next step? As you leave to go home, which of these 5 areas is the next step for you in moving the GLOs forward, or your version of a 21st century student? So the first is, you got to have a vision. And by the way, with no disrespect, the State Department GLOs, I think, are outstanding outcomes, but they got to be your vision. You may need to modify them. You may need to localize them. The one thing I know is you got to own them. You got to own them. So I thought it would be helpful to share with you, a lot of the districts that we work with have created a profile of a graduate. And that's something that you can adopt the GLOs as they are as your profile of a graduate. You can take a few and add a few. If you're listening to me, you can slip in creativity and innovation. I'll do that a couple of times. But the goal is to articulate your version of student B. So how many of you think that your school or district has articulated and adopted a profile of a graduate that's your version of student B? Raise your hand. Okay. Maybe 10. So this is important because this is where you guys could head. So I want to give you some examples. This is Fairfax County, Virginia. This is actually 185,000 students, so it's almost the equivalent size to the student population, public school population in Hawaii. And can you see these 5? Ethical and global citizen, collaborator, goal-directed and resilient, creative and critical thinker, and communicator. It looks similar, but it's not identical, right? And then you can see that they actually, so it could be that in the same way that the ESSA task force has been doing its work, potentially locally, you need to create a conversation around what does the local version of student B look like. And I should just tell you one quick story about this, just so you know. I do facilitation in communities a lot, and I was going to Springfield, Missouri to facilitate a conversation with 400 parents. The superintendent calls me up and says, Ken, we know you do the 4 C's, critical thinking, communication, collaboration, creativity, but in our community, we only talk about 3 of the 4 C's. So I said, are you telling me ahead of time which one is not good, or am I going to figure this out when I get there? He said, oh, it's creativity. It's a liberal conservative problem, and the liberals like creativity and the conservatives don't, so we sneak creativity inside critical thinking and communication and collaboration. And then he said, while you're at it, I just want you to understand how localized this needs to be. He said, while you're at it, please don't bring up the term global citizen. So I said, well, can you tell me about that? He said, in our community, if you're globally oriented, you put the interests of the world ahead of the interests of the United States. I'm not casting, everybody's got their own local flavor to this. So the first draft of this in Fairfax County, the middle column read citizen. The first draft read citizen. And they came back to their second meeting, and there's 7 or 8 of them really agitated. And I said, what's going on? We don't like the term citizen. And I said, well, what's the problem? He said, we have 204 languages in Fairfax County. And people see that term citizen and think we may mean it literally, you have to be a citizen. And I said, well, what term do you want? And they said, well, we like the term global citizen. And I said, okay, but don't move to Springfield, Missouri. Okay. I think I've made my point. This is a wonderful set of learning outcomes, the Mount Vernon Mind. And I love this for 2 reasons. One, it's student-facing. I am a creative thinker. I am an innovator. I am a collaborator. I am a communicator. I am an ethical decision maker. I am a solution seeker. This poster is on every classroom in their school. And when you walk into a K-1 classroom, the kids actually know, this means I'm a good team player. They know the icons at kindergarten and first grade. So just imagine if 5 years from now, You're walking into every classroom in Hawaii, and they know what the icons for the GLOs are, or your version of the GLOs. Just imagine that, how powerful that can be. This is an individual school that does project-based learning. And they didn't have, this is again a poster in every classroom in their school. The kids know these icons. So lastly, I want to tell you about Upper Arlington. This is a district outside of Ohio that I went and I worked with them for about 9 months to create that black circle, which is critical thinking, communication, collaboration, creativity, global citizenship, and self-direction. And when the superintendent was done, he said, you know, would you come back and meet with 400 faculty members and do sort of a pep talk about our 6 21st century outcomes? So I said, sure. So I get there, and at the end of my talk, he had taken this and turned it into a decal, and he put it on a 79-cent Target plate. And I thought, I went all the way from Tucson to Columbus, and I got a 79-cent Target plate. I didn't say a word. I was very polite. The next thing I realized why it was he wanted a cheap plate. He says to his staff, bring out the plates. There are boxes of 400 plates with this on it, and they hand it out to every teacher and faculty and staff person in the system. And after the last one is on somebody's lap, he says, for the last 9 months while we've been working on this, a lot of you, particularly teachers, have been coming up to me and saying, is this one more thing you're adding to my plate? And he goes, no, this is the plate. This is the plate. So the question is, and by the way, he said to me, Jeff Weaver's now retired in Dallas, he said to me, anybody who wants to steal the plate idea, feel free to steal it. So you can, but the issue for you all as we leave the vision topic is have you defined your 21st century plate? Has Hawaii defined it? Have your complex area superintendents created a process for refining it? Do you have a 21st century plate? So that's where I want to leave that topic. So there's no other more important, and how many teachers are in the room, by the way? How many are teachers? Great. There is no more important topic than whether we can translate that vision into classroom practice. That's the holy grail here. The concern I have about the GLOs is that we haven't gone to convert them into classroom practice. That's the difference between where you are today and where some of our districts are. They've made the conversion of the GLOs to classroom practice. So the suggestions are, you got to go see 21st century classrooms. You have some, I met a couple of people running 21st century classrooms on the asset task force yesterday. But you need to go see them, you need to know what it looks like. If you don't know what a 21st century classroom looks like, you have to see one. But you also have to start with the premise that your own teachers actually know a ton about what good practice looks like, right? So one of the districts I work with did a brilliant thing. They said, we have 6 outcomes, but we're going to start for 2 years doing professional development only around critical thinking. Right. Only around critical thinking. And they started in a way that they didn't ask me for this advice. I now give it everywhere I go. They interviewed hundreds and hundreds of their teachers, all their teachers. And they asked them only one question. What is the best example of your critical thinking or problem-solving pedagogy? What's the best example of you as a teacher today teaching critical thinking or problem solving? And they interviewed everybody. They took the best 35 examples of that, and they gave those 35 teachers a room in the high school for the day to do professional development for the whole district. And the teachers just walked around the high school seeing the best examples of critical thinking and problem-solving pedagogy of their peers. It's a brilliant thing to do. But then what they did, and this is equally important, they got the 35 of them together and they said, What's missing in the district? Now that we've embraced what you do, what aren't we doing that we should know? And they said, we don't do any design thinking in our district. We don't do any systems thinking in our district. We aren't focused on absolutely brilliant student work product in our district. And therefore, we need to have some outside people supplement. But the PD is much more powerful when the teachers themselves are saying, these are areas we need to learn, rather than somebody saying, well, this is what we're going to do, the PD we're going to do for you. So what's important is that it is embracing your current capabilities, but we're not going to get where the governor has asked us to go if we don't embrace new pedagogies as well. So how many of, this is, by the way, I'll just tell you right now, this is one of the most fun parts of my talk. So, just to get everybody re-engaged here. How many of you know Austin's butterfly? How many of you are familiar? Okay, that's great. There's only like 8 of you. So here's the ground rules. None of you can answer my questions. The 8 of you don't answer the question, you're ruining this. Austin drew this butterfly. What grade is Austin? Somebody? First, excellent. By the way, it's more fun when somebody says 8th, but it turns out you're right, so there's not much I can do about it. Okay, so for a first grade butterfly, what do you want to say about the butterfly? Good butterfly? All right, you don't know the assignment yet, I'll tell you in a minute. It's a STEM assignment of observation. On a 10-point scale, what are you going to give this butterfly for a first grader? Somebody? 8. Okay, that sounds good. I'm with you. Okay, so this is Austin's final draft. Whoa! How did Austin get from here to here? How did he get from one place to the other? He looked at real butterflies. He looked at real butterflies. He was given time. I like these. These are better than the response I got in Colorado where somebody shouted out, his mother did it. I went, you think I came all the way to your district to tell you that his mother did it? I don't think so. Okay. So here is the kicker. This is the photo they were given. And then the teacher was told, you can give Austin no direct instruction. You can give Austin no direct instruction. What is going on there? What is that about? So people go, pardon? Yeah, Austin had to look for himself. No, here's the deal. Austin is in a group of 8. And the teacher's told to work with the 7 to help them help Austin. Okay? So now the 1,000 of you are going to do this with me. So you're the group of 7, and you're looking at draft 1, and what are you going to tell Austin? What do you tell him? What's the advice you want to give him? Pardon? The wings, but that's not enough advice. The wings won't. What advice? More detail? Well, look, tonight as your homework, one of your homework assignments, you're going to have a couple. Go to YouTube and look up either Ron Berger or Austin's Butterfly, and he'll walk you through this. But Ron Berger is the Chief Academic Officer of Expeditionary Learning. This is his brilliance. And there's a triangle in the shape that's missing. Try to put a triangle in. So he goes to draft 2, and look at draft 2. What does the group of 7 tell Austin about draft 2? Can you tell? He goes, there's a feature of the butterfly that goes straight at the bottom, right? You see that? Goes straight at the bottom. See if you can get that bottom right, okay? And so he goes off and does draft 3, and you know what they told him after draft 3, right? He lost the triangle. So they tell him to put the triangle back and then look at draft 4. And then they tell him to fill in the details. He was ready to go do the details. And that's how we got Austin's butterfly. Is that cool? Okay, how many of you seen this pedagogical strategy in your classrooms? How many? Okay, couple. Why do you think we don't see this pedagogical strategy? It takes time. I got that. Oh, and the kids have to talk to each other. Well, it's a problem if you want collaborative kids. Yeah. So here's my theory. My theory is that none of you really believe that collaboration is a required outcome for your kids. If you believed in the GLO that said, and if it was clear that you had to come out of 12th grade with a GLO that says, my kid's going to be a good collaborator, you'd find this pedagogical strategy. The reason it's lingering in the expeditionary schools, in my view, is because they absolutely require every kid to graduate as a good collaborator. And by the way, I almost got rid of myself, so let me just say something about this. 2 or 3 observations to make about the power of Austin's butterfly. One is that when I was in the 5th grade, this was about the quality of my butterfly. And they told me to just not bother with the arts anymore. By the way, that's how I ended up in law school, because they told me my butterfly was so pathetic. But I've always looked at this and gone, maybe I was capable of draft 5 or draft 6. And we left it on the floor. We left it in the classroom. So here's what happens in education that's got to shift. We give a C- or a C or a B+ to draft 1, and we cut off the rest of the process. Tony Wagner calls this, in 21st century education, iteration. Iteration is the call of the day. The kids look. And by the way, this is how 21st century work is done. This is how it's done in Apple and Google and my company and anybody else's company. We don't give an employee the opportunity to just put up draft 1 and say it's not good enough and go on. We all collaborate around how to make it better. I guess the other thing that's the third area that I know that I'm going to talk more about this, but I've already alluded to it, is that once we really transform pedagogy, we're transforming assessment at the same time. And so part of the beauty of having this conversation here with all your leaders is we don't just need to change classroom practice, we need to be open to new kinds of assessment, right? We're not really, okay, yeah, please, I'll take something. By the way, just for you all, they're applauding more, that's why I'm this side of the stage. So you get with it and I'll move over. So I will work with you. I'm not going to go through our creativity rubric. If you come to my breakout session, if you're really interested in creativity, I'll share with you our creativity rubric, and in our workshop we'll work with it and around it. But here's the important message about this. You can't do the GLOs if you haven't really done a good job of defining them. And we've created rubrics with 80 districts around the country for critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. And you're going to think about how is it that you're going to collectively define the GLOs and whether you have world-class definitions of them, which you need to have given the challenge that's been put in front of you. But the rubrics, the superintendent said to us, well, the rubrics aren't enough, actually. And we need performance tasks so that teachers know how to teach these things. And so in our conversations now, we've been building performance tasks. So I happened to be in this class, in this elementary school in Arizona that had been participating in our common performance task assessment. And we created, the teachers actually from our participating districts, created a performance task for 5th grade STEM in ELA. And it was basically to work on a problem-solving rubric that I'll show you, a problem-solving rubric, and to judge a letter they would write to a community in Bangladesh about how to minimize the impacts of the next earthquake. Okay? How to minimize the impact of the next earthquake. So if you look over the middle student's head, there's 4 or 5 reading materials. They all had to read the same reading materials. But then they had to write this letter to this community. So I say to the fellow on the right, how did you like that assessment? And he goes, oh, it was such a great assessment. I don't hear that much in my class. And I said to him, why was it such a great assessment? He says, it was fabulous because I learned a lot about problem solving, which is you have to do it at different levels. And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, when you read the material, one of the biggest problems was horrible shards of glass coming from the windows. So at one level, in my letter, I told parents to move sofas and beds away from windows. He says, but that wasn't enough, so I actually also had to recommend to the city council that they change the building code for buildings to make the building safer. And then he turns to me and says, isn't it interesting that you have to solve problems at the house level and at the city level? And I go, and this is a 5th grader. I said, bingo, right? Fabulous. We'll work, in my breakout session, we'll have one of the letters done by a 7th grader, and we'll look at it and relate it to the problem-solving rubric, and you'll be able to judge how well this person did. So the 4th area that I want to focus on is culture. And I think you all know that this work can't happen in environments in which there isn't a spirit of collaborative, continuous improvement. So when people say to me, what's the secret sauce of transformation? It's whether or not there's a culture that embraces change. And the other things we're talking about, the vision, the pedagogy, and the assessment, have to live inside that culture of continuous improvement. So my favorite high school in the country is in San Diego. A lot of you know High Tech High, you've seen movies about it, but it really is, it doesn't look anything like my high school that I went to. And I've gotten to know the Chief Academic Officer, Ben Daly, who's really terrific. And I'm coming over here anyway, I just gave up. I figured. All right, I'll be back. And I said to Ben, why does this high school feel so fabulous? It doesn't feel like my high school, and it doesn't feel like any high schools I've been to, almost any. He said, we focus on collaboration. We obsess about collaboration. We hire to collaboration. We don't hire teachers who aren't good collaborators. And we think we have that system down, but if we miss it, they're gone in 3 to 4 months, and they know it up front. We say to them, we think you're a good collaborator, but if you're not going to make it here. Because there's no room for people that aren't really into collaboration. He said, but the second thing is we have protocols. And these protocols define how to create safe space for teachers. I said, I'm not really following you. He says, we're a project-based school, we don't let a project into the classroom unless a teacher has presented it to a group of his or her peers. And this protocol tells you what the 40 minutes looks like. 5 minutes presentation of the project, 5 minutes, what's the right word? General questions, then probing questions, and then the team of teachers that isn't being reviewed discusses it without his or her participation, And then the teacher whose project it is responds, and he says the last 5 minutes is the most important, in which we decide whether or not we've created a safe space for the teacher and whether we got the information to the teacher that the teacher needed to improve the project. What did I just describe to you? Pardon? I described to you a protocol. What else did I thank you? What else did I describe to you? Austin's Butterfly for Adults. Wonderful. Who said that back there? Yeah, do we have a special prize? That's fabulous. Austin's Butterfly for Adults. The adults go through the same collaborative team-making process that Austin and his students went through in that school. Thank you for that. That's the first time that anybody's ever shouted that out, actually.
We're way above the bar.
So I'll share this, given that comment about the adults. I was sharing our creativity rubric with 35 administrators in a big district in Texas. And I asked them to spend 15 minutes reading it and a half an hour discussing how they would use it in their district. And they spent all this time saying, we're going to embed the creativity rubric for this student standard and this curriculum and this assessment. And then about a half an hour in, one of the assistant superintendents goes, shouldn't we be using this rubric for the adults in the system? And I said, what made you say that? And she goes, well, go to page 7 of your own rubric. And she reads it to me. And she says, level 1, openness encouraged to explore. This is a subset of creativity. Describes and explores ideas in black and white terms with little attention given to diverse points of view or shades of gray. Displays low tolerance for ambiguity. Rarely challenges existing parameters or ideas. And she said to me, do you think we have any teachers like that in our system? At which point her deputy administrator says, do you think we have any administrators like that in our system? But here's the point I want to make. The culture is that if you're going to grab the GLOs for your students, you got to grab the GLOs for the adults in the system.
There you go.
Right? And a lot of our districts spend the first year embedding the GLOs by using the rubrics for the adults. The leadership team meets and discusses the collaboration rubric, the creativity rubric, the communication rubric, which one did I miss? The collaboration rubric, all of them, or whatever they are. So here's where we are on this culture issue. I now want you, based on the discussion we've had, how would you personally find the sweet spot between transformation and accountability? In your classroom, in your school, in your district, given the conversation we just had, how do we square these two terms? I want you to reflect on that for just a moment, privately. Okay, you can turn to a different neighbor or the same neighbor, depending on how the first conversation went. And I want you to chat with each other about what was your reflection about how these two could be mutually supportive of one another. How would you do it? How would you do it? Okay. I guess we don't have unanimity on this yet. Okay, let's go, everybody. I'm bringing us back together. Okay, does anybody want to summarize the group's opinion on this? Yeah, please.
Our discussion was that for a cultural transformation to happen, there needs to be some form of asset, some kind of assessment of asset management.
Okay.
In other words, to widen our evaluate what are the good points about that communication. Then, going off the path has not negative. What
Okay,
are the good points,
So-
and then build on that good points for accountability.
okay. Any other, yeah, sir, go ahead.
The sweet spot begins to reveal itself.
Yeah, can you stand up though? The sweets, I'll repeat this for everybody. You didn't think you were gonna get away with not standing, good job. The sweet spot reveals itself.
The sweet spot begins to reveal itself when you start with why, not end with why.
The sweet spot begins to reveal itself when you start with why, not end with why. I like that. Thank you. Yes? Yes. 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 Yep. Okay. One more.
Just one more, just the idea of assessment and accountability, how schools are being held accountable on quantitative measures and not qualitative measures.
Okay, but I know why I know why we're not getting to where we want to go. I want to know what do we do to square these. So we'll talk about, yes?
Well, you have to adopt the change. You have to embrace the change.
Yes.
Because you either get everything or you actually, progress. And the reason is, if you look at the business, you have Nokia. Nokia was the best, company ever. Okay, they didn't do nothing wrong at all. They're good businessmen. But what they did is they didn't adopt the change. So now they're no longer in business and they have to merge.
Right.
And something.
That's very similar to the story that the governor told. So let me, I agree with that. And here, let me sort of wrap this up, and I have a couple more things I want you to do, but wrap up this piece, which is we started the 21st Century Skills Movement the same time they started No Child Left Behind. And people said to us, why are you doing this? And we said, because what NCLB is going to do is start taking snapshots of what's easy to take a snapshot of. It's lying around. It's what exists. But it doesn't mean that it's measuring what matters. So to bring us now 15 years later, what ESSA has the opportunity to do is have you define what matters and then have the accountability system measure that. That's how you create that sweet spot. That's what I think. So, the last piece is the leadership piece. And it's a critical piece because the style of leadership is shifting dramatically, and we know that. And if you don't adopt the leadership style in your building, in your district, that is consonant with transformation, you're not going to be able to change either. So, some people don't like this photo so much, but the reason I chose Leader A is that this actually, I lived 2 blocks from the superintendent of my school district growing up. And this is what John Smith looked like. He actually looked IBM. And that was his leadership style in the 50s, and it worked. But that's not the leadership style that works today. Thank you. So we could have put, and maybe I should have put, the GLOs here. And so we'll have to look and maybe think about whether the GLOs become your definition of leadership, which might be a totally appropriate thing to do. But what I'm saying is that the leaders, the teachers have to embrace and model the competencies you want for your kids. So this talk is not just to talk about what student A looks like. It's a challenge to get you to define what teacher A looks like. Student B, sorry, let me try that again. I'm going to try that again. It's not just to talk about what student B looks like, it's also to talk about what teacher B looks like and leader B looks like. And they have to be in alignment. So,
So
well,
are we missing something?
yes, I just said that. I said we're missing several things, the GLOs, and you may have a nomination. I wasn't trying to be exhaustive. When I redo this speech again for Hawaii, I will promise you I will modify this slide. my apologies. What we've done in EdLeader 21 is we've created 190 members. We actually now have 3 in Hawaii. And we hope as a result of today, maybe we'll have more in Hawaii, who are doing this work collaboratively around the country, trying to embed both their version of the GLOs, some of them call it the 4 C's, as well as the methodology that I've showed you, which is the steps of transformation. So, the last thing I want you to think about and talk about is, these are the 5 areas of transformation that we've gone through this morning. As you think about this and you go home tonight, tomorrow, maybe you go back to school Monday, maybe some of you are on vacation, which of these areas of transformation strategy are you going to be focused on next to move your version of student B forward? So I want you to reflect on that, just privately for a minute. Where do you start in your school or your district? Leadership. Okay. Anybody else have another starting point? Culture. Okay. Anybody else? Art. Vision. Those all make sense, actually. Okay. So, I want to end by sharing with you the conversation I had with Ollie's superintendent. Because she said to me 18 months ago when she started, it was actually a year ago, so a year ago this week, she started, she said to me, I'm going to go down this path, but I really want to know if you think that I'm doing the right thing. And I said to her, when I started the 21st Century Skills Conversation in 2001, 2002, I believed in it. But every year that's gone by, I've become more convinced that the student competencies that we identify and customize locally are what's going to propel the education system into the next century. And when I look at this list, and I think about Ollie at age 37, I have no doubt that if he actually had those competencies, that he'll survive whatever the turmoil is over the next 30 years. Economic, civic, personal, that is what will prepare him for the challenges of the next 30 years. And so, that's what I want you to reflect on. For you, for your kids, for your nieces and nephews, for your grandchildren, but as educators, for your students. If we could be here 5 years from now, and if the system was actually redesigned to produce these outcomes, Hawaii's system and students would be the head of their class for 21st century workforce, for 21st century citizens, for 21st century life. And that's an incredible opportunity that you all have as a result of this process being kicked off. And I congratulate all of you who have initiated the process, but more importantly, I congratulate all of you who are willing to participate in it, and don't let today be the end of it. This is long haul. All of our districts have been working on this. The best ones have been working on this 5, 6, 7 years. So This is a journey worth taking. Because when my wife said, are we accountable to the kids? This is what we should be accountable to them for. Thank you very much.